Welcome to the latest episode of the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. Thanks so much for either watching on YouTube or listening on SoundCloud. My name is Hunter Baumgardt, the host of the podcast. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HunterBOnAir. You can also like the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Facebook page as well. Well, the Packers draft is over. The NFL draft is over. Boy, was that an interesting one. Almost every pick that the Packers made was like, really? What? They did that? Who'd they pick? Who is that? Oh, he won't impact the team for another 10 years? Oh. So I'll be a grandparent by the time all these draft picks are on a team. Anyway, in all seriousness, it was quite a draft for the Green Bay Packers, not necessarily in a good way. So I want to dive into that. Also, coming up, don't miss this. Jordan Love, of course, the first-round pick for the Packers. Packers loved him. Let's see what he did in college that made the Packers love him so much. We're going to talk to Jason Turner, Utah State football beat reporter, coming up in a little bit on the podcast. So super excited for that conversation. We'll get real deep into Jordan Love, his college career with a guy who covered him for his entire college career for the Herald Journal in Utah. So we're going to get to that in just a little while. But first, I wanted to give you my take, as you can kind of see in the intro there, about this Packers draft. I mean, the podcast I put out last week, we were talking, I wanted them to trade up for a wide receiver. It's time to get Rodgers weapons. We've said that year after year after year, and it doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. I mean, they just will not do it. The Eagles had an exceptional wide receiver draft and trade. They got Goodwin from San Francisco, and they drafted wide receivers. I mean, they are set up, and they got Jalen Hurts. So the Eagles basically are what the Packers are, but on a whole nother level, because they were actually able to draft wide receivers. Gutekunst, it's actually possible to do that. And then they got a quarterback that could be the quarterback of the future, depending on what Carson Wentz does. It is mind-boggling, the lack of ability for the Green Bay Packers to put wide receivers around Aaron Rodgers that are picked in the higher rounds. I was asking for them to trade up to get one of those top four guys, right? Lamb, Ruggs, Judy, Jefferson. I wanted one of those four. I understood, and I would have understood, and I still do understand, that they weren't necessarily able to trade up for those guys. Those guys were coveted by a lot of teams. But there were a lot. It could have been the deepest wide receiver draft in NFL history. There were a ton of wide receivers taken. None of which taken by the Green Bay Packers. So that's just one thing. Then they trade up and get a quarterback in the first round. I was shocked. I mean, my jaw nearly hit the floor, I think, when I saw the Jordan Love come across the screen when Roger Goodell said they draft Jordan Love. Look, there's rumors, right, about Jalen Hurts, about Jordan Love, that the Packers could be looking into these guys. I didn't realize how much Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst really liked Jordan Love. And he's in a good position, no doubt. And we're going to get to more about him coming up with Jason Turner. 6'4" quarterback. Gave up a fourth-round pick. I don't know. It depends on if it was necessary to jump all those teams in the first round, like what are the three teams they jumped. I don't know if that was necessarily necessary to give up a fourth round, that maybe you could have gotten a wide receiver. But anyway, that's what happened. But here's what the NFL draft was for Green Bay this year. They are completely betting. They are betting on guys in this draft instead of getting guys who were available when they drafted, like a Queen, or trading up for a guy like Jefferson, or T. Higgins, or Chenault, or Pittman Jr. Some of these guys who were available, they could either be traded up for, like they traded up for Love. They could have traded up for a wide receiver. They really wanted Love, though. They're betting on guys instead. This whole draft is one big bet. In a year where you have to draft to win now, in a draft, in a season that you just came off an NFC Championship berth, an NFC Championship loss that you got basically embarrassed in front of everybody, especially that defensive side of the ball, letting the San Francisco 49ers run all day, and you draft a quarterback in the first round, and then you draft a running back in the second round, and then you draft a tight end / fullback / wide receiver / quarterback / guy that probably may not even come to fruition in the third round. And then you skip the fourth round, and then you get a bunch of guys, the 5, 6, 7. Who knows? I mean, everybody says, some of these guys will be great. They could be great, but a lot of them aren't. So we'll just see. But man, I mean, it's just mind-boggling. And the funny thing is, Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst have to be just like watching everybody either before the draft. Okay, they must have been sitting up at they couldn't be together, so they must have been doing this on FaceTime, right? Brian Gutekunst has got his phone here. LaFleur, his face is on there. LaFleur's on the other end, and they're FaceTiming, right? And they're like, we have tricked the media. We have gotten them in the palm of our hands. We have tricked the NFL. Everybody, thinks we're going to go in the deepest wide receiver draft. Everybody thinks we're going to go wide receiver, maybe even trade up for a wide receiver. People think maybe we'll go running back. No, we're going to trade up for Jordan Love in the first round. Not just wait for Jordan Love to get there. Trade up for him. And then the second round, we're going to get a running back from Boston College, right? We were talking about Jonathan Taylor. We were talking about J.K. Dobbins, some of the running backs that could go to the Packers. No, we're going to get A.J. Dillon from Boston College. Then we're going to get a tight end in the third round that could be a fullback. If he's a fullback, look, even if he is a fullback or whatever it is, a third round pick on him. So like I said, LaFleur and Gutekunst had to be just FaceTiming the days leading up to the draft, last Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and they'd just looking at each other like, we got him. We tricked them. Just with those smirks on the face. You could see how happy LaFleur was on that phone call when they drafted Love. I mean, And of course, drafting a quarterback in the first round, Aaron Rodgers, a lot of is being made of how he's going to react to this. David Bakhtiari saying he thinks he's going to play with his hair on fire coming up this season. Saying that he's going to have a lot of motivation this season. And that could be true. There's a difference between motivation and not being able to help a younger QB. It's possible that you could have a Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers scenario, but I don't think it's probable. And we'll do a podcast on this coming up. And we'll dive deep into what. And I like this, the form of podcast that we do. We do about 15, 20 minutes because I think you can really dive into one topic. And this is a lot to cover with the NFL draft. And I'm not going to get into every gory detail today. But I want to get into this Rodgers thing because I think the media, a certain part, not everybody in the media, but there is a big contingency of media and now fans who have seen the media in the last 3 to 4 years. It might be, I don't know if it's at its peak right now, but it might have been last year, about this whole, especially when McCarthy left, and about Rodgers' relationship with McCarthy and Rodgers' relationship with other teammates and not mentoring. And if you listen to actual teammates of Aaron Rodgers, it is such a different story. And so I want to be one of the people in the media to tell you that Aaron Rodgers is not as bad of a teammate as people keep making him out to be. So we'll talk about that coming up and why I think this Aaron Rodgers-Jordan Love relationship could really, really work, and why I don't think this is going to necessarily break up the locker room in any sense. Why I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to, kind of leave Jordan Love in the dust by any sense. I don't think that's going to happen. So, sure, Gutekunst put Rodgers in a scenario where that could happen, right? Like a Brett Favre scenario. Brett Favre wanted to keep his job, obviously, and saw this young guy come in. Rodgers wants to keep his job, obviously, sees the guy come in. It's obviously two completely different scenarios. It's different. This is different. Favre was obviously wavering on retirement. Rodgers hasn't even spoke of that. That it's different, but it's also the same in the fact veteran quarterback, Hall of Famer that is got a younger quarterback coming in behind him. So we'll talk about that maybe in more detail coming up on another podcast. But I mean, this is a very telling draft that they're building for the future here. And one of the other things is Matt LaFleur, and a lot of this was made about Matt LaFleur wanting his offense or drafting players that are going to fit into his offense. And it begs the question, do you, as an offensive system, right, do you adapt your system to the players you have a little bit at least? Sure, it's going to be a lot of the system. Sure, Matt LaFleur came in and put his spin on the Packers offense last year. There's no doubt about it. It's not like he came in and used whatever McCarthy and Rodgers used for all those years. He switched it, and that's what I think really helped him get to the NFC Championship game. But do you adapt somewhat? I think last year, and we saw now, especially with this draft, that they want to go to this run first, power running game kind of deal. And if you look at what happened last year, that's not really what of course, they ran the ball a fair amount, but that really worked well with Rodgers. And if you're going to, with Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback, implement a system with like an A.J. Dillon, say after Aaron Jones leaves this year, and you still want to just, pound it, and kind of have that offense that is a run-first offense with Aaron Rodgers, I'm all for a balance, really, to be honest, because I don't think you should be necessarily too much to the pass, too much to the run. And I think they're probably too much to the pass a lot of McCarthy's later years. But I think with how this whole offense is shaking out, and especially with this draft, them being a running first offense with Aaron Rodgers just doesn't necessarily sit well with me. I think, like I said, if you can use, and like they used Aaron Jones last year, they used him to their advantage like crazy. They used him running the ball a lot, and they used that to open up with Aaron Rodgers because they haven't necessarily had that the last 3 or 4 years. There hasn't been the great running backs in Green Bay at all, really. I mean, there's been not much to speak of there. So when Aaron Jones came in, we finally have a good running game. You can balance that with Aaron Rodgers. Sure, you can prepare to run more because maybe Rodgers will be on the decline, but I don't think you should necessarily turn this offense into a complete up the gut run, like a A.J. Dillon is being compared to Derrick Henry. You want, I mean, sure, he's a good running back, but I don't think you want to just pound it down the throat all the time and just Rodgers keeps handing it off when you have one of the best QBs to ever do it under center. So, it begs the question, do you adapt your system to the players you have, or do you kind of force the system on your players and that's just how it goes? I think there's going to be a balance of both, and I think we saw a little bit of a balance of both last year, and I think we're going to see a little bit of a balance of both coming up this year again. But as we get towards 2021, 2022, I think we're going to keep seeing the more emphasis on Matt LaFleur's offense, and they really built that this year in this draft with the draft, the tight end in the third round, but also A.J. Dillon in the second round. I mean, that showed where they're kind of leaning. So that's kind of my take. As you can see, not super happy about what the Packers did in the NFL draft. I mean, I because we got Jason Turner coming up here, don't want to go into every single detail about every player. You can go and look that up anywhere. But ESPN put out a great product. I mean, and NFL Network and all the networks, they put out a very good product. I mean, they really had no glitches. I think I saw today that they didn't even need to stop the clock for anything. They anticipated if there were technical glitches, they'd stop the clock. I mean, they did really, really well. So that is awesome. And I think it was very nice for a lot of sports fans to kind of be able to watch something that's live that, kind of takes your mind off things. So that was awesome. And but the Packers draft, not so awesome. And boy, oh boy, that was something. I mean, every pick was like, ooh, ooh, ooh. So that's how it's going. You know what? Let's talk to Jason Turner. He is the Utah State football beat reporter for the Herald Journal in Utah. I want to get his take on Jordan Love. I want to get his take on, seeing him in college. What impressed him? What can Jordan Love take from the college game to the pro game? What happened when he went 32 touchdowns and 6 interceptions in 2018 to 20 touchdowns and 17 interceptions in 2019? What happened there? Let's talk to Jason Turner. Jason Turner, Utah State football beat reporter for the Herald Journal in Utah, joining us on the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. You can follow him on Twitter at HJ Trebek. Of course, wanted to get his thoughts on Jordan Love going to the Green Bay Packers. He saw him up close and personal throughout his college career. And first of all, Jason, thanks so much for taking a couple minutes with me this afternoon.
Yeah, my pleasure, Hunter.
Yeah, so let's get into Jordan Love. Obviously, you covered Jordan his whole college career. I'm curious if you were surprised where he was drafted, or like where he was drafted. Sure, 26 overall, especially first round into the Packers. What do you think of where he was drafted?
Well, I was expecting Love to get drafted later in the first round.
Okay.
I was a little surprised that the Packers traded up to select him, but in my opinion, it seems like a pretty good landing spot for him. He's going to need a couple of years to develop with a pro offensive coordinator, and it's nice for him to be able to observe, maybe get some pointers from a future Hall of Famer. I think this is a really good situation for him.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Just kind of thinking about all the places he could have landed, a place maybe that they needed him to be the starter year one. Do you think this is kind of the best option for him to be able to sit behind, obviously, a great quarterback in Aaron Rodgers, but to sit behind a veteran quarterback for a couple of years?
Absolutely. I think a situation like this, or if he would have been drafted 24th by the Saints,
Mm.
be able to learn from Drew Brees, observe him. And I think those are the kind of situations that will best suit him right now.
Okay, yeah. So Jordan Love, a lot of people have been, as I've been seeing this all over, social media and talking to some people that I know. Jordan Love had the 32 touchdown, 6 interception season in 2018, and then all of a sudden 20 touchdowns, 17 in picks last year. And he lost obviously a lot of offensive starters for 2019. But looking at that, was that what made the difference, or what do you think contributed to such the downturn in 2019?
Well, I think first of all, 2018 was kind of the perfect storm for the Aggies. First of all, he had David Yost as an offensive coordinator for the second straight year. The
Mm.
Aggies had different offensive coordinators the previous couple of years, and so he was able to be in the second year of the same system. Um, the Aggies had a very favorable schedule in 2018. And yeah, I mean, they had veteran playmakers back, plus they added Darwin Thompson as a junior college running back. He now plays for the Kansas City Chiefs. And so you had an NFL running back. You had Dax Raymond, who up until today, he was cut by the Bears today, but he played last year with the Bears. So you had those guys, and um, yeah, it was just a perfect storm. Favorable schedule, second year in the same offensive system, and just uh, an arsenal of weapons to plus they returned their entire offensive line in 2018.
Mm.
2019, much tougher schedule, quite a bit tougher, honestly. You only had one offensive lineman who returned. You lost a lot of your skill position guys, and they brought in a different offensive coordinator, and he tried to keep things really, really similar, but frankly, it wasn't his base offense to begin with. So, I mean, there were a lot of different factors that went into his decrease in production.
Sure. I think a lot of people were curious because you see a stat line like that and the difference and people are kind of that jumps off the page at you. But there's a lot of factors that obviously go into that. Do you think Jordan Love is more the QB of 2018, 32 and 6 touchdown to interception ratio, or do you think he's more the 20 touchdown, 17 interception kind of boom or bust scenario?
He definitely needs to improve on his decision making. I don't think there's any question about that. But I think I would veer more toward him being the 2018 version. I think
Okay.
I mean, they really did lose some good weapons, and the offensive line was brand new basically in 2019. Plus, week 3 against San Diego State, I think um, Andy Coach, who was playing, I think he was their best offensive lineman at the time, suffered a season-ending knee injury, and
Mm.
then his replacement actually got injured against LSU, and so they were using their third string. I want to say it would have been third string right tackle. So, and certainly I'm not trying to put the onus all on the offensive line, but yeah, there were definitely a lot of factors that played into the decrease of production.
So seeing Jordan Love throughout his Utah State career, what impressed you the most watching him up close, or what wowed you that you're like, wow, this guy can be a very good NFL quarterback?
Honestly, I just think how effortless his throwing motion is.
Mm.
He makes a 50, 60-yard throw look effortless, just like a little flick of the wrist. He throws a tight spiral, and he really can put a ball in a tight window. Sometimes that got him in trouble on occasion in 2019, but he also I can think of a spectacular play he made every single game last year. So yeah, 17 interceptions is way too many, but and and I think the other thing for me is just he's very kind of cool and collected. He wasn't a very emotional guy, and so he wasn't the kind of guy who would just fall apart if he made a bad decision, and he wouldn't get too hyped up if he made a really, really good play. So I really think that kind of even-killed personality will serve him well in the NFL.
Jason Turner, the Utah State football beat reporter for the Herald Journal, joining us on the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. You can follow him on Twitter at HJ Trebek. So, Jason, another question for you. So, you were around Jordan Love at a lot of his games, more than nearly all Packers fans. Is there something like a story about Jordan Love or maybe a game that really made an impression on you, or maybe an interview you did, something like that you could share with us?
I think maybe one of the games that I will look back and really remember Jordan for is that the game when they beat BYU in Provo his redshirt sophomore year. The running game did more. I mean, Darwin Thompson and Gerald Bright both had big games running the football, but Jordan threw 4 touchdown passes, and he also rushed for another touchdown. And just to see what they were able to do in front of 60,000 fans, and that was one of the few games where he actually did show a little bit of emotion. He kept, for his 5th touchdown, he kept the ball in a read option, and he put his finger to his mouth and shushed the crowd. That was one of the few times I actually saw some emotion from him, and I think that's a game I'll look back and remember where we really saw we saw all those tools, and that he could be a next level quarterback.
Yeah, and you speak of being a next level quarterback. What skills do you think Jordan Love has that can really transfer to the pro level?
You know what? I think he's pretty elusive for a guy his size. He didn't run the ball a whole lot in college, but he did
Okay.
he did actually rush for 7 touchdowns as a redshirt sophomore. I mean, he has pretty nimble feet, and he's faster than I thought he was.
Mm.
And he ran a good 40 time at the NFL Combine, but I think he can extend plays. I think he can get outside the pocket. And I'm sure you probably heard about how he can throw a ball from all sorts of different arm angles, delivery angles, and I think that's going to serve him well once he shores up that decision making.
Sure, exactly. Well, Jason, I really appreciate the time. Super excited to have you on and just talk about Jordan Love, kind of get more of an in-depth view of him, and hopefully we can talk again down the road.
All right, Hunter, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jason. That's Jason Turner, the Utah State football beat reporter for the Herald Journal in Utah. You can follow him on Twitter at HJ Trebek. Thanks again to Jason for joining me on the podcast this week, and great to get his perspective on, what Jordan looked like throughout his college career and what stood out to him. What can he take to the NFL level? So a lot of interesting things, including the arm angle that he can, all the different arm angles that he can throw at. The mobility is something that a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL right now have, and that's something I'm sure the Packers looked at and said, all right, that would be a plus, most definitely. And of course, the difference between the 2018 and 2019 season, statistically, vastly different for Jordan Love. So it's interesting to get his thoughts on that. Well, thanks so much for watching the podcast. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HunterBeOnAir for all of the updates about the podcast. Be sure to like the Facebook page as well. Just search Hunter Baumgardt Sports. And you can also watch or listen to the podcast. Remember, you can watch it on YouTube or listen to it on SoundCloud, whatever is more convenient for you. Just search Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. Once again, thanks for watching. We'll be back real soon. And stay healthy, everybody. We are getting through this. It's a nice sunny day, so enjoy the sunshine if you can. And as always, stay positive.